Phylicia Rashad had finally spoken, and what she revealed about Malcolm-Jamal Warner's final days wasn't just heartbreaking. It left the entire world in shock. For weeks, fans were trying to make peace with the news of his sudden death. But when Felicia, his longtime friend and on-screen mother, broke her silence, everything took a dark, unexpected turn. You won't believe what she said. Because what sounded like an ordinary tragedy at first might not have been ordinary at all. From the outside, Malcolm seemed fine. He had been away from the spotlight for a while, but people assumed he was simply living a private life. He was only 54, full of talent, respected by the industry, and loved by fans. But now it turns out that behind closed doors, he had been withdrawing, turning quiet, and keeping things to himself. People close to him noticed a change. They said he stopped attending public events, avoided social media, and rarely answered calls. Something wasn't right. Let me tell you, this is how it all started to unravel. Felicia revealed that Malcolm had confided in her just days before his passing. He told her things that now seem like warnings. "I feel like I'm on borrowed time," he said. At that time, even she didn't fully understand what he meant. But now, those words sounded like he already knew something terrible was coming. What makes this story different? It's not just about a man who passed away. It's about a man who felt it coming, and no one saw the signs until it was too late. Close friends said he had been acting strange. During a private dinner just 2 weeks before his death, Malcolm was unusually quiet. He wasn't his usual joyful, expressive self. People at the table noticed he spoke in past tense a lot, as if his story was already over. One guest recalled him saying, "I'm proud of what I've done. If it ends here, I'm okay with it." At the time, they thought he was just being reflective, but now it felt like a goodbye. The craziest part, he didn't stop there. Malcolm had also sent out a few cryptic texts to old friends. One message read, "I wish I had more time to say goodbye." Another said, "There's so much I never got to tell you. Maybe it's better this way." These texts shook everyone to the core. It wasn't just sadness. They sounded like a man who had accepted the end. But the question was, why? Some began to wonder, was he sick? Was he hiding something? Or worse, was there someone threatening him behind the scenes? Felicia hinted that Malcolm had been feeling deeply uneasy. She said he often spoke about a shadow following him. He couldn't explain it, but it made him nervous. He said it wasn't fear of death, but fear of being taken before he was ready. This is where it gets interesting, because even though the cause of death was reported as drowning, things just weren't adding up. He had been visiting the same lake repeatedly in the last week of his life. Witnesses said he stood there alone for hours, just staring at the water, saying nothing. Friends said he spoke of water like it had meaning to him, like it was calling him, and guess what? That's where his body was found. Coincidence? Or did he choose that place on purpose? But here is the shocking part. Police ruled it an accident, but insiders believe there might be more to it. Felicia's interview revealed even more disturbing details. She said Malcolm made a farewell call to her just 2 nights before he died. His voice was calm, but his words were heavy. He told her, "If this is the end, I just hope they remember the real me." She thought he was being emotional, not literal, but now she believed that call was his way of saying goodbye, and she wasn't the only one who thought so. His family later admitted he had quietly updated his will and made guardianship arrangements for his kids, something he had never done before. It felt like a man preparing for something final. Destiny took an unexpected turn. A strong, talented, loving man who made millions laugh and think deeply through his art was suddenly gone. But his final days were full of warnings, signs, and secrets. Something deeper was going on. And as more people began to talk, it became clear Malcolm might have known the end was coming, but he wasn't telling everyone why. Was it illness? Was it fear? Or something much darker? Felicia Rashad's voice trembled during the interview, but her words were crystal clear. Malcolm wasn't just facing something internal. He was battling something bigger, something he refused to name out loud. She said, he was carrying a weight and he didn't want to burden anyone else with it. That statement alone sent chills down everyone's spine. Because if he didn't want to burden others, what was he hiding? This is how things started getting darker. Friends close to Malcolm revealed that during his last few months, he had become deeply spiritual, but not in a peaceful way. One person said he wasn't just praying, he was questioning, asking why he felt like time was slipping. He began talking about dreams, disturbing ones, nightmares that left him shaken. Felicia mentioned that Malcolm told her he had been dreaming of water, darkness, and people pulling him under. At first, she thought it was just stress, but after what happened, those dreams suddenly looked like warnings. And here's the craziest part. Those dreams weren't the only signs. People started going back through his recent social media posts, and they saw a pattern. Quotes about endings, reflections about legacy. One post said, "We prepare for the end by living fully." Another said, "Some stories are written in silence before anyone hears the final word." These weren't just poetic lines, they were signs. Silent messages he may have been trying to leave behind. What makes this story different? Most celebrities hide their struggles because of the spotlight, but Malcolm did something else. He left a trail, quiet but powerful, like a man who wanted to say goodbye without actually saying it. And then came the revelation that stunned everyone. Malcolm had been diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder. Felicia didn't name it, but sources close to his family said it was something that slowly took away his energy, focus, and mobility. A silent illness that had no cure, and one he chose to battle alone. He told Felicia, "I don't want people to remember me as someone who was sick. I want them to remember my fire, not my fading." That single sentence captured everything. His silence wasn't weakness, it was control. He didn't want pity. He didn't want headlines about sickness. He wanted privacy in a world that gave him none. But here is the shocking part. Felicia also hinted that Malcolm didn't just keep it private for personal reasons. She believed there was pressure, real pressure, from people or systems she refused to name. He was worried it would ruin everything. His work, his legacy, his family, she said. That's when things turned from tragic to suspicious. Was Malcolm warned to stay quiet? Was there someone who didn't want the world to know about his condition? Why were certain people around him suddenly silent after his death, people who had always spoken publicly before? And why did it feel like the entire industry was treating his passing like an accident, when the signs clearly pointed to something deeper? You won't believe what happened next. Close friends said Malcolm had started planning a memorial, a small, private one, well before anything happened. He had even chosen music he wanted played. One of them said he wanted a jazz piece that spoke about peace after pain. It was as if he knew, not just hoped, not feared, but knew his time was ending. And this is where it gets interesting. Just 2 days before his death, Malcolm made calls to 3 people. One of them, who asked to remain anonymous, said Malcolm sounded calm, but tired. He said, "It's all coming together now. I just want to go quietly." That line has been haunting people ever since, because it didn't sound like someone afraid. It sounded like someone who had accepted their fate. But the biggest mystery still remained. Why did Malcolm think he had to go alone? Why didn't he share his pain with the world that loved him? Was it pride, fear, or was he protecting someone? As the news of Malcolm's passing spread, fans flooded social media with messages of disbelief, heartbreak, and confusion. But many weren't just grieving, they were questioning. Because the deeper people looked into Malcolm's final weeks, the more it felt like he had been living 2 lives. One in public, calm, distant, quiet, and one in private, filled with fears, confessions, and preparations. People who had worked closely with him began to open up anonymously. One director said Malcolm had canceled a project suddenly without explanation. He told them, "I'm sorry, but I have to pull away. Something's not sitting right with me." That director assumed it was stress, but now, after everything that's come out, it sounded like a quiet exit. He was stepping away from the spotlight, but not because he wanted to, because he needed to. And then came another shocking discovery. Malcolm had been in the middle of a legal battle. It was about ownership, his image, royalties from old projects, and control over some of his past creative work. Multiple sources said he felt betrayed, that people he trusted were trying to push him out of deals he built with his own hands. One insider said he felt trapped, like no matter what he did, someone was watching, waiting for him to slip. Now you might be wondering, how does a legal battle connect to his death? Let me tell you. Phylicia Rashad believed that those pressures, combined with his illness, created a storm that Malcolm could no longer fight. She said in her interview, "He felt the walls closing in. I could hear it in his voice, not panic, but surrender." But the craziest part, Malcolm had stopped responding to most people in the last 10 days. He would read messages, but not reply. He stopped answering his phone. He even changed the locks on his home and told neighbors not to disturb him. Was he protecting himself? Or was he isolating because he didn't want anyone to stop what he had already decided? Then came the autopsy. It said he drowned. No signs of struggle, no wounds, no substances. But that's what made it even more confusing, because Malcolm was a strong swimmer. He had loved the water since childhood. People close to him said he used to say, "Water gives me peace, but I never want to disappear in it." So how did this peaceful place become the final scene of his life? This is where it gets darker. Felicia didn't say it directly, but she hinted at something heavy. She said, "There were things Malcolm knew, but he wouldn't tell me. He said it was safer that way." What did that mean? Was he hiding something, not just from fans, but even from her? You won't believe what another friend came forward and said. Malcolm had been working on a private journal, a handwritten notebook he never shared with anyone. In it, he wrote poems, thoughts, and letters to his children. That journal still hasn't been released to the public, but those who've seen it say it's full of goodbyes, full of wisdom, and full of warnings. One of the last entries reportedly said, "If I leave early, it's because the noise got too loud. I wanted to leave quietly, with dignity." That one sentence made people stop in their tracks, because it was no longer about drowning. It was no longer about illness. It was about silence. A silence he chose, not because he wanted to, but because he felt he had to. And yet, the silence around his passing hasn't just been from Malcolm. Other Cosby Show cast members, people who were once close to him, have said nothing, no tributes, no posts, no interviews, just silence. Why? Were they asked to stay quiet? Are they afraid to speak? Or is there something even deeper happening behind the scenes? Just when the world was beginning to accept the pain of losing Malcolm, Phylicia Rashad came forward one last time with a confession that shattered every remaining piece of calm. She revealed that Malcolm had been living with a rare, aggressive neurological condition, one that slowly broke down his body and spirit. And he kept it hidden, not because he was ashamed, but because he didn't want to be remembered as a man in pain. He wanted to be remembered as an artist, a father, and a fighter. He never wanted sympathy, Felicia said. He wanted silence, dignity, and control over how his story ended. That silence, however, came with a price, because while the world saw a calm man slipping quietly out of the spotlight, inside he was carrying a weight few could imagine. He felt his body failing him. He felt time speeding up. And most of all, he felt alone. This is where it gets emotional. In his final conversations with Felicia, Malcolm said something that stuck with her forever. He said, Sometimes the hardest part isn't the ending, it's knowing the world will never understand why. And maybe that's true. Maybe we will never understand everything that haunted him. But here's the shocking part. Felicia hinted that the illness wasn't the only thing Malcolm feared. She believed there were external pressures, forces he never fully explained, that pushed him further into silence. She said there was something else he was carrying, a secret, something dark. What was it? Was it related to the legal battles, a betrayal, or something that had followed him from the past? She didn't say, and maybe she never will. But the pain in her eyes during that interview told the world that whatever it was, it left a scar. But even through that pain, Malcolm left behind something powerful. In that private journal, one of his final entries read, "I may not have had time to tell my whole story, but I hope someone does. And I hope they do it with truth." And that's what this video, this moment is truly about. Truth. Because what makes this story different isn't just the tragedy, it's the message. Malcolm-Jamal Warner, a man loved by millions, spent his final months battling illness, pressure, fear, and loneliness. And yet, he chose not to scream. He chose to face it all with quiet strength. Destiny took an unexpected turn in his life. But even in his final days, Malcolm tried to leave behind something meaningful. His story teaches us something that goes far beyond fame and celebrity. It teaches us that sometimes the people who seem the strongest, are fighting the hardest battles in silence. That quiet sadness in their eyes, it means more than we think. That sudden disappearance, it might not be what it seems. Fans all over the world have responded with grief, but also with action, sharing his story, creating awareness for mental health, rare illnesses, and the hidden pain so many people live with. Malcolm's story is no longer just about loss. It's about understanding and compassion, and remembering that behind every smile, there might be a storm we cannot see. So if this story touched your heart, remember this: never assume someone is okay just because they seem calm. Never stay silent when you can reach out, and never let a legacy like Malcolm's be forgotten. He wanted his story told, and now it finally has been. May Malcolm-Jamal Warner rest in peace, not just as a brilliant actor, but as a man who faced darkness with quiet strength. And in doing so, left behind a story that will continue to echo in our hearts